Hello, Seiiti Arata. You will never be able to win an argument if you continue to fall prey to logical fallacies. To understand the problem, you can think of an illusionist who does a trick to make an object disappear in front of you. He makes some quick moves and distracts you, directing your attention elsewhere. In much the same way, there are people out there who are skilled at misdirection and taking the conversation where they want it. And you need to learn to identify when that happens. The general term fallacy means an error in argumentation, and this error often happens simply because the person does not know how to argue properly, and they make mistakes even without having a bad intention. But today we're going to talk about something that is more specific, which are the logical fallacies. That are the fallacies that some people use on purpose to deceive you or to convince you to do something that is not on your best interest. So get ready to learn about the main logical fallacies and find out how to protect yourself from each one of them. Don't fall victim to overgeneralization. It creates a false rule of thumb. Overgeneralization is a very common fallacy. It serves to convince you of something even without solid evidence. This type of fallacy is also known as the hasty conclusion. And I'm using generic names on purpose because the most important thing is for you to understand the concept, not to be memorizing nomenclatures. For example, your friend Samuel. Sam comes here and he discovers a new cryptocurrency called Bubblecoin. It has tripled in trading price in just one day. He excitedly says that you should also invest in the Bubblecoin cryptocurrency to earn some money. In other words, he's generalizing the situation and tricking you into believing that all new cryptocurrencies can make you rich. But you can't just take one isolated example and make a generalization out of it. To protect yourself from this kind of fallacy, ask about the evidence. In this case, from Samuel, you can ask, how many other cryptocurrencies were invented in addition to Bubblecoin? Which ones had a similar valuation? What is the risk? How many had a sharp drop in price and basically never recovered? How long will Bubblecoin continue to rise in market value? What will be the price action after it reaches the top? Is Bubblecoin an exception, or does it represent the general rule? But pay attention, when some evidence is presented, it doesn't always mean that you must fully believe it. Often the problem is that the excessive generalization is presented together with another dangerous fallacy, which is the inadequate conclusion, or non sequitur. To understand the inadequate conclusion, let's first explain what is the syllogism, which is a specific form of reasoning. In the syllogism, you start from valid premises to reach a conclusion. Usually you have a major premise, a minor premise, and then you have a conclusion that follows logically from the premises. Let me illustrate that with a very classic example, simple to understand, of the syllogism that is, all humans are mortal. Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. Now, malicious people use the inadequate conclusion fallacy to build arguments that break the rules of syllogism. For example, the person could say, well, if it rains, then the street gets wet. Well, the street is wet and therefore it rained. This argument sounds like a syllogism, but it is wrong because the conclusion is not logical. Maybe the street is wet because someone dropped a bucket of water on it. It would be correct to say that if it rains, the street gets wet, and it rained, therefore the street is wet. Now, yes, the conclusion follows from the premises and the argument now is true. You notice how the difference is very subtle. That is why overgeneralization and the inadequate conclusion are two fallacies that can easily fool you. The best way to not fall for this is to train yourself to notice these subtleties. Don't be fooled by a rule of thumb. Generalizations can lead to stereotypes and misleading simplifications. Overgeneralization can escalate to stereotyping, which is a very dangerous fallacy. The stereotype is ignoring the individualities within a group when the characteristics of that group are generalized. For example, the stereotype that every Brazilian knows how to samba, or that Germans are cold and calculating. Well, this type of fallacy can generate prejudice and close so many opportunities for you. We already talked about the problems in labeling people in episode number 4 of this series, Hello, Seiiti Arata. Another fallacy similar to generalization is oversimplification. That is when a person uses simple justifications instead of seeking a more complex answer. Imagine a conversation about obesity, and then somebody says, "Oh, come on, that's silly, just shut your mouth." But the truth is that obesity is a multifactorial problem that involves hormones that modify the person's appetite, and therefore just trying to close your mouth is not a very effective solution. In both overgeneralization and oversimplification, it is important to assess the complexity of the subject. So ask questions to clarify arguments, but be careful, the person on the other end might respond with yet another fallacy, the appeal to ignorance. Appeal to ignorance is when someone tries to prove you that something is true simply because it has never been proven to be false, or claim that something is false because it has never been proven true. It seeks to add confusion, completely ignoring your question and answering other questions, other things to divert your focus. You remember our example with Samuel when he says that cryptocurrencies are the future and he made a lot of money investing in bubble coin. Then you go and then show him episode number 15 of the Money Arata series, which explains that the only truly decentralized money is Bitcoin. You explain that cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin are two completely different things. And finally, you explain that cryptocurrency projects, just like Bobocoin, are centralized projects and therefore they have intrinsic architectural flaws. But instead of arguing about this specific point and accepting the fact that Bobocoin is a centralized project, which has owners and founders, initial allocation, the pre-mine, and vulnerability due to centralization, Samuel answers that, well, it's difficult to prove that Bobocoin is centralized because do you have any court filing showing, any judge telling the Bobocoin is centralized? Since there is no such proof, it is difficult to know. In addition, it's a very fast network with low transaction fees, and there are so big celebrities supporting the project, and so on and so on. That is, he avoids responding to your criticism about the centralization of the project, and instead tries to distract you by talking about other aspects that are irrelevant, and also with the aim of tricking you into also falling into this Bobocoin scam. Watch arguments, not people. The authority of the person who is speaking cannot be an argument to convince you. When people don't have convincing arguments, they may resort to the fallacy of the appeal to authority. And this happens a lot when the hierarchy is strong, like in traditional companies, in families, within circles with politicians. In a business setting, the appeal to authority can be made in the case, well, supervisors are involved. Imagine a project. The whole team agrees that it is a bad idea, but then the team finds out that the project actually an idea came from the director of the company, and then suddenly everybody changes their mind and they start to praise it. It is hard to protect yourself from the appeal to authority when you just can't confront the authority directly. But if someone justifies something using someone else's authority, well, you can realize that you're no longer faced with a question about the merits, about the quality of the idea, but it's just a hierarchical imposition. There is yet another fallacy related to the speaker, which is ad hominem. In this fallacy, instead of arguing against the opinion, people attack the owner of the opinion. For example, imagine that Norton is an engineer, is proposing an innovative technical solution to bring electricity to everybody at a very low cost. However, there is this video that ends up leaking on social networks in which Norton is mistreating a pet. And then suddenly all the rage from the canceling mob starts to attack and saying that Norton's invention should not be used. Now, you see how things are different here. The quality of Norton's invention is no less efficient, but the canceling mob wants to mix things up, which, using morally reprehensible actions in Norton's personal life as an argument to prevent the development of his invention. Now, similarly, it is also wrong to ignore Norton's morally reprehensible behavior just because he is a brilliant engineer. What we can't do is to mix things up. To defend against this kind of fallacy, bring the focus back to the message rather than the messenger. Beware of the vicious cycle. An argument cannot justify the argument itself. The vicious circle fallacy happens when a new argument is actually a repetition of the previous argument. For example, your friend says that the school where he studies is the best in the market because it has the best teaching in the city. What? Do you see that this statement is actually taken as a proof of itself? This is why the fallacy is also known as the circular argument. This fallacy convinces many people because it uses synonyms, uses complicated words, so that one single argument sounds like multiple justifications. To defend yourself on this type of vicious circle, you can ask the person to give you a new reason. But be smart with the answer, because it might be that the person amends with another fallacy, which is the false cause. The false cause fallacy often happens when the coincidence is confused with cause and effect. For example, someone might say that they are unlucky every time they walk under a ladder, but there is no actual relationship between one thing and another. It's just one correlation. It's a coincidence. The dilemmas you face often don't exist. Beware of false analogies. Even when there are many solutions, it is common for people to present you only with two options for solving a problem. This is the fallacy of the false dichotomy. The false dichotomy appears a lot in advertisements, when the advertisements suggest that either you buy the product or you're never going to be able to solve your problem. To defend yourself, you can ask, now what if, followed by options opening new paths. A similar fallacy is the false analogy, when the person compares completely different elements to arrive at a supposed conclusion. For example, a person selling a food supplement might say, I took it and I lost a lot of weight. So if you take it, you're going to lose weight as well. But the same supplement can have completely different effects on two people with different bodies. Sometimes this fallacy takes the form of the false axiom. An axiom is the truth in itself, something that we don't need to be demonstrating the validity of. For example, if you drop an apple in the air, it will fall. That is an axiom. The false axiom is when a person uses an apparent truth. For example, saying that you can't succeed in life without studying. It seems true, but there is no direct relationship between education and wealth. If it existed, well, teachers would all be millionaires. The examples we have been giving here are showing fallacies with very obvious examples, but in everyday life it is not always easy to identify these fallacies, especially when we're acting more with emotion rather than reason. The first step in defending yourself against these fallacies is something that you've already taken here, is learning about these types of arguments. Now, it is important for you to practice everything you've heard today to never be deceived again, never be convinced of doing something that you don't want to do, and never fall into scams again. Fallacies are reasoning errors that are often used by ill-intentioned people to convince you to do something that you don't want to do, or to defeat you in an argument. Now that you know the main fallacies and you have tips to defend yourself, it is time to implement what you've learned to sharpen your intelligence against these types of traps. For you, we're interested in increasing your intelligence levels. Now I want to invite you to attend a special class of the Intelligence Arata Academy training by going to the address arata.se/intelligence.